Hello, everyone, and thank you for stopping by. Imagine a TV show with an intriguing post apocalyptic story, a dedicated fan base, and a fight for survival, both on screen and off. Despite being cancelled, fans refused to let the show die, launching one of the most legendary TV show revival campaigns ever. But even after getting a second chance, it wasn't enough. So what went wrong? Why did it get cancelled not once, but twice? And is there hope for a return? Let us dive into the rise and fall of the legacy of the show, Jericho. Before we get into it, I'm going to warn you, it's going to seem a little scatterbrained at the beginning, and that's because I'm going to try to have two parts to this. One part where someone who didn't watch the show that doesn't want it spoiled can watch it, but then people who have seen the show can continue on and see more information, and I'll have warnings when there's going to be spoilers, so just bear with me with that. I just kind of wanted to put that out there. But a quick summary of the plot. So what happens is there's nuclear weapons that go off all over the country. And the show follows this small town called Jericho that's on the outskirts of Kansas City. The show focuses on a family called the Green family and several different members of the family. But as the show progresses, you do follow the point of views of more characters that aren't a part of this family. But essentially, you're following this small town. You imagine, since it's Kansas City and Kansas, that the town's very small and it's farming town in the middle of nowhere. So when the bombs go off, they really don't know what's going on. They don't have any contact with anyone. And the nearest city is like a 30-minute drive away. So that's all I'm going to really talk about the plot until I get to the second part with spoilers, because there is a lot with the plot I think that went wrong with the show, but I don't want to spoil that for people who only want to watch the first part. So this show came out in 2006 and it had 11 episodes in the first part of the first season. And I say the first part because the first season has 22 episodes in total, but it had one of those like mid-season breaks that a lot of the shows have been doing now lately. So out of curiosity, I looked up why a lot of these shows had these mid-season breaks, and it said that a lot of it was because of holiday slumps and just like it's a strategy. But I realized the show came out in November, so I wonder if they just kind of skipped over Christmas because they didn't want to have the show running on Christmas, and it started back up in February of 2007. But after reading an article, it seems that the show, it had a lot of popularity when it first came out, but after this break, a lot of the viewers didn't come back to the show. So when the second half of for the first season came out, it had a very low viewership and the ratings were pretty low. So when the season ended, they weren't going to continue it because the ratings were too low and they couldn't justify it. But apparently the show did have a good cult following because I thought it was really funny, and I had to double check to make sure it was legitimate, but apparently there was this huge like push to have the show revived, and it just was insane to me. And I don't know, I have to look more into like why they did it. But after CBS announced that they were canceling the show, fans mailed in 20 tons of peanuts to the show saying nuts that the show was canceled. And I did look up why they did it, and actually it makes a lot of sense now. So I don't want to get in too much into spoilers here, but there's a part where they're fighting someone and they ask them to surrender, and the guy responds with nuts, which is a reference to a World War II general during Christmas where the Germans asked him to surrender and he said nuts. And that was like his actual literal reply to the Germans. Like officially, he just said nuts is all he said to their reply. So this was kind of in reference to that, where they just sent a bunch of nuts into the CBS saying, nuts, we're not going to surrender. We don't give up. We want the show to keep going. And I just think that's hilarious and awesome. And I wish people would get behind stuff like that more often, because that's just awesome to me. And it actually ended up working. They ended up bringing up the show back for another season. So after this campaign, CBS started the show up for a second season, and it ran for 5 episodes, and the ratings weren't where they wanted it to be, and the show was still not doing great. Even though it had like a dedicated following, it just wasn't enough. So they ended up making the last 2 episodes be like a conclusion. So the show kind of feels like it does conclude really fast. Like it has all these stories building up, and like a lot of suspense that just kind of ends all of a sudden, like really abruptly, and that's the reason. And I won't go into it too much. I'll go into it more when I get to the spoiler section of this video, but just know the last 2 episodes were really rushed, and that was because the show was going to cancel, and they're like, we're going to can this, but we want to end it on a good note. We want to have the story be not on a cliffhanger or anything like that. However, the show wasn't over yet. So in 2009, a publishing company known as IDW Publishing released a comic book series called Season 3 Jericho Civil War, followed by another comic book called Jericho Season 4 in 2012. Between the two comics, there was 11 issues that were made, and I haven't looked into them at all or really know what the story is. But if this video gets to, let's say, 750 likes, I will buy this comic book, all of them, and I'll read them and I'll do a review on them and tell you how it is and if it's worth reading yourselves. So be sure to hit the like button if you want to see me go through the comic books, and I might share a little bit with it as well. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I've never done a video like that, but for you guys, I would do it. But anyways, I looked up online and it says that the sales were decent, but it wasn't anything great. And I didn't even know there was a comic book series for it until I was looking at it later. And I had watched this show like a long time ago, but I never finished the second season. Back when I watched it, it was after the first season was canceled, and I never realized there was a second season until somebody requested that I watch the show. But yeah, I didn't really look too much into the comic books other than the ratings and such. And like I said, they're pretty moderate, but be sure to hit the like button. I'll let you know how the comic books are myself and I'll get them. And like I said, anyways, moving on. So during 2012, the show Jericho was playing on Netflix, and the show's numbers were doing really good on Netflix. And Netflix during this time was making a lot of movies for themselves and like taking shows that had shut down and continuing them is something that they were doing a lot during this time. But from the article that I read, it said that the rights were with CBS still and that they didn't want to share the creative rights with Netflix. But they also had a lot of budget concerns, and it was just seemed like there was a lot of issues with like the getting the rights, and the budget for being able to reboot the show was a little high. And even though the fan base was pretty vocal, they were a pretty small group. So Netflix ended up just shutting down the idea, unfortunately, which I think it would have been really good because it was only like 5 years after the show had canceled for the second time. So all the actors wouldn't have been like too old and stuff like that. So it's really a shame that they didn't take it, but it seems pretty normal that companies are just kind of greedy and don't want to share the rights for anything, and they kind of just want to leave stuff put to rest, I guess. And like, I don't know, I guess if Netflix took it and it was a success, it would have been like, we did what you couldn't and we're better than you. I don't know what their reasons were for not allowing them to have the rights to it. All right, so now we're getting to the second part of the video where there's going to be spoilers ahead. So if you don't want spoilers for the show, you haven't seen it and you want to watch it, this is where you can stop. Unless you don't care, then you can keep going. But a lot of this stuff moving forward, I've kind of given the facts of the matter, what happened in the first part. And this second part is going to be a lot of my opinions and a lot of like what I think went wrong. So just letting you know, this is all my opinions and what not. So you can let me know in the comments what your opinions are on it, but this is just my opinions. So after a rewatch of the show, I think the first season was really good. And there was a few things that I would have changed, but I think it was doing pretty well. And I really loved the first season, but the second season was just really slow, I feel like. So I have a lot to say about the second season, so I'll talk about that. But first, I want to mention with the first season, I feel like they bring back the government too soon. Well, as we know, there's several governments technically, but like the government that comes and interferes with Jericho, like I think it was kind of too soon because there's still a lot that they could have done. I mean, it kind of gives like Walking Dead vibes where they're kind of like dealing with other cities themselves and they're trying to like figure things out. But it's like as soon as they realize there's a more open world and they can interact with these other cities, they suddenly go to war with New Bern, and then all of a sudden the government starts stopping it. And it's like you didn't really have too much buildup and like too much stress between like fighting with these other towns and trading. And I feel like they could have done more with that. But I mean, the show did end after one season, so like what could you really do? But I think if the show is going to go for the long run, should have had a few seasons before the government really showed up, and they could have had battles with the other towns. They could have had trading and had the New Bern and Jericho situation like build up more. It just kind of seemed like the New Bern people were just kind of crazy going after them, and I don't know, it just seemed like a little fast for me, and I think it could have been slowed down a little bit. So before I go into my season 2 rant, I want to talk about the characters in the show. The first thing I want to say is the characters in this show are really good. And I feel like when you have characters where you actually care about them and you won't want them to die and you actually like bring in emotions with it, I think the characters are amazing. And this show did that really well. Like when a main character dies in this show, you actually feel it, and it actually is really sad because there's a lot of shows that I watch where I really don't care when main characters die. But I also wanted to mention that the villains in this show are fantastic, actually. Like the leader of Newburn, like Phil Constantino, he's like the perfect bad guy, like where he kind of has this like demeanor where he can go from like a really friendly guy that you'd be having beers with on a Friday to someone that's just pure evil and will do anything and whatever they need to do to get their people to live and do whatever they need to do. And I think that the interaction that he has with the people of Jericho is like perfect because you have this like sense of like they're threatening to attack Jericho and the people of Jericho just don't believe that they really would. And then it happens and then you just kind of realize just how ruthless this guy really is. And talking about villains, I also want to talk about the Ravenwood people. But the leader of the Ravenwood is John Goetz, and I just think it's kind of like he's just such an interesting character to where he has his own little things going on, and he kind of does whatever he wants. But he's the contrast between him and Constantino are very interesting because they're both leaders of these groups, but Constantino's like doing all these things like ruthless to try to help his people, whereas Goats is like doing all this stuff to help himself and the people like that he works with are like serving him. And I think the contrast between the two villains is really good. And I feel like a lot of shows that kind of just copy and paste their villain, but like this is really good. And you got these both of these villains in the same world that's going on, and it's just I feel like it was done really well, essentially. All right, let's talk about season two now. So, a lot of the action and suspense that's in the first season was left out in the second season. And I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't suspense in the second season, it's just not as much. You kind of lose like the post apocalyptic vibe that it has because the power gets restored. They don't have to worry about gas, they don't have to worry about food. Like everything's just kind of given to them at that point. Like the government's helping them out. But like, you just I don't know. Like a lot of it's like this stuff where you're finding out that the government isn't really what they say they are, and they're kind of like doing away with a lot of the old American history and stuff. They're trying to get rid of the Constitution and stuff like that, which I definitely have mixed feelings about because there was definitely parts of this that I really enjoyed, but there was also just parts of it that just seemed so stupid. Like they full well know that Goats had a run in with Jericho before and with Newburn. Like they actually went into Newburn and murdered people, and I mean, Jericho ended up fighting him off, not having any real big issues with them. But they had these like, they hated this guy and they decided to put him as the overseer of the town. And it's just like, I feel like the government really could have thought better of that and it didn't make any sense. But like I said, I do have mixed feelings about it because this guy is a fantastic villain. Like, you just kind of have this like intrigue of like, you know, he's a bad guy, but he's got this like face of like, I'm a professional, I'm putting this all behind me, but you really know that he isn't. And he has like parts where with Beck thinks he's like this great person where he's like professional, but you know that he actually like does all this stuff from the behind. Like, you know, he's embezzling funds and he ends up trying to kill everyone that finds out about it. And he's just like this terrible guy that has like this face of being a good person. And I just think that's fantastic. But I'll stop ranting about that. But for the first part of the second season, that's really the only gripe that I have is just like there's a lot of stupid decisions that they just seem to make. But the last two episodes, like I said before, they were really rushed, and like the CBS told them to finish it up in two episodes, so it was rushed. And I don't really blame the showrunners too much for it because it was out of their control essentially. But I'm gonna say the biggest gripe that I have about this show is the fact that it like never really settles on who was responsible for the bombs. I mean, it does because like Hawkins is on the phone with this guy that's like trying to help him like get the bomb to him, and you think that he wants to like expose the company that is there, like this evil company, and you think that this evil company was responsible for the bombs the whole time. But then later on, you find out that there's actually this guy on the phone that's responsible for the bombs, and like he blew it up because he wanted to. He pretty much destroyed half America because he wanted to expose his company as being bad, and so he blew it all up. And then he wants to take the last bomb that Hawkins has and deliver it to Cheyenne and blow them up and get rid of them for good. And he's like the mastermind behind everything. And this guy, I kid you not, he's on screen for 10 seconds, shoots Hawkins once, and like is about to give this big villain speech, and then Jake just comes in and freaking executes him, and that's all the guy. He's done. It's the guy who's the mastermind behind everything, just done in one shot, like literally 10 seconds on screen, and it's just so stupid. And honestly, I finished the show yesterday and I still am confused on what's really going on because they still deliver the bomb to Texas to prove that Cheyenne is behind the bombs. But then, like, you actually found it was actually this other guy that was responsible for it. But like J and R were the ones that made the bomb, so they're technically still bad. And it's like you really don't know what's going on at the end, and it really just ends super fast. And they get the bomb to Texas and they go to war, and that's just how it ends. And like I don't know, it just really grinds my gears. But anyways, I think you're getting the picture of my issues with the second season of Jericho. It's really sad to see that the show just kind of didn't really get the chance that it needed, even though the fans obviously sent in all those peanuts and wanted the show to get another chance. Like the producers and the people in charge of the show just decided it was going to end in 2 episodes and made it just pretty much garbage. The last 2 episodes are just garbage. I'll say it. Like, it's really sad. I really enjoyed this show, and I feel like if they gave it a proper chance, it could have done a lot better, and it could have been this show that ran on for several seasons. But anyways, what's your guys' thoughts on this show? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you like the first season? Did you hate the second season? Have you read the comics? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing your guys' comments on what you guys think of these shows. And I will say the Terra Nova video really took off, like a lot more than I planned on it. So I will be doing more of these videos. So let me know in the comments what the other 1 season or 2 season shows that ended too soon that I should go over. I do really enjoy making these type of videos, so I want to do more of them, but it does take me time to go through the shows because I have to binge watch the shows and find the time to do that. But also there's just so many shows people are recommending, so I will take the top like couple ones that are on commented on here. So be sure to comment any show you want me to go over, and if you see anybody that's commented a show you want me to go over, be sure to like it. And the top 3 comments, I will go over those ones next. But like I said, these videos do take time. This is a lot of editing, a lot of watching shows, so be sure to pick only your favorite ones. And anyways, thank you guys for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.